All right, let's dive into the most incredible machine in the known universe, your brain. We're about to take a tour of the hidden assembly line inside your head, the one that takes the complete chaos of reality and somehow turns it into the world you actually see, hear, and understand. I mean, just think about it for a second. Right now, there are sights, sounds, maybe even smells all around you. It's a constant, massive flood of data. And yet, somehow, you're focused on this screen, you're hearing my voice. So what's the trick? How does your brain take that blizzard of information and pull out something clear and useful? Well, it all starts with one crucial first step.
And that very first step in making sense of everything is filtering. You see, before your brain can even begin to understand anything, it has to decide what's worth looking at in the first place. And that massive job belongs to your attention.
You can think of attention as the bouncer at the nightclub of your mind. It stands at the door and it decides which bits of information get the VIP pass to come inside and which ones have to stay out on the street. It's the mental spotlight that you shine on a few key things while letting everything else fade into the background.
But here's the thing. Attention isn't some kind of superpower. It has some pretty clear limits. For one, our mental span is surprisingly small. We can only really hold about 7 or 8 things in our mind at once. It's why phone numbers are broken up into chunks. We're also super easily distracted, and spoiler alert, we are terrible at truly dividing our focus. And on top of all that, our attention is always wavering, like a pendulum, even when we're trying our best to focus.
So, speaking of divided attention, do you think you're one of those people who's great at multitasking? A real master of juggling tasks? All right, let's put that to the test with a simple challenge that really shows the limits of what our brains can do. You should totally try this later. First, try writing the alphabet again and again. Easy, right? Then, try saying odd numbers out loud. Also pretty simple. But now, try to do both at the same time. You'll find out really quick that you slow way down, you start making silly mistakes, and it all just gets confusing. And that's because you're not actually doing 2 things at once. Your brain is just switching back and forth between them really fast, and it just can't keep up.
So, let's say a piece of information gets past that bouncer. It gets your attention. What happens next? How does the brain actually figure out what it is? This, my friends, is where perception comes into play.
Perception is where the real magic happens. It's not just about sensing something, like light hitting your eyeballs. It's about your brain taking that raw sensation and giving it meaning. The formula is pretty simple. What you sense, plus what you already know from your entire life, equals your perception of reality.
And this whole process is a two-way street. Sometimes you use what's called top-down processing. Your brain uses context. It sees an A and a C, so it just assumes that weird shape in the middle must be a B. But other times it uses bottom-up processing, building from the raw data up. It sees a 12 and a 14, so it perceives that exact same shape as the number 13. Your brain is constantly flipping between both of these methods to figure out what's going on.
Now, to keep from getting totally overwhelmed, our brains have these incredible built-in shortcuts that automatically organize everything we see into patterns that make sense. They're often called the laws of perceptual organization, and they show us how our minds are hardwired to create order out of chaos.
First up is the law of proximity. Your brain doesn't see 8 random separate dots here. Nope, it automatically, instantly groups them into 4 pairs just because they're close to each other. It's an unconscious grouping mechanism.
Then we have the law of similarity. Here, I'm willing to bet you see vertical columns, a column of circles, then a column of crosses, and so on. It's actually kind of hard to see them as horizontal rows of mixed shapes, because your brain naturally groups together things that look alike.
The law of continuity is all about how our brain prefers to see smooth, flowing patterns. We see one single straight line crossing over one single curvy line. We don't see 4 separate lines all meeting in the middle. Our brain just follows the smoothest path.
And finally, there's the law of closure. Your brain is so eager to see patterns it recognizes that it will literally fill in the missing pieces for you. You absolutely see a triangle and a square here, even though they're just a bunch of broken lines. Your brain closes the gaps to create a whole object. It's amazing.
Okay, so we've let some information in, we've figured out what it is. Now we get to the really high-level stuff, thinking. This is where we start to actively play with and manipulate that information. So let's take a look at the tools we use to do it.
Thinking is really built on these 4 key things. It starts with a mental representation, like the specific image of your own dog in your mind. From there, you form a concept, the general idea of dogginess that includes all dogs, not just yours.
Then you link that concept to others to form a schema, which is like your whole mental blueprint for what a pet is. It includes dogs, cats, food bowls, going for walks, all of it. And finally, we use language, the word dog, to communicate and juggle all of these complex ideas.
One of the biggest things we use our thinking toolkit for is solving problems, and it's usually a very logical step-by-step process. First, you have to actually define the problem correctly. Then you brainstorm all the possible solutions. After that, you pick the one that makes the most sense, and finally, you try it out and see what happens. It's a simple, logical flow that we use for everything from fixing a leaky faucet to planning a vacation.
But then there's creative thinking, which is a whole different beast. It's way more mysterious. It also starts with preparation, but then comes the most important part, incubation. That's when you actually step away from the problem and let your unconscious mind chew on it for a while. That's what leads to illumination, that sudden magical aha moment. And the lesson here is pretty profound. Sometimes the best way to solve a tough problem is to just stop thinking about it.
So, we pay attention, we perceive, and we think. All of these experiences, they don't just disappear. They actually change us. They physically rewire our brains. And this whole process of change is what we call learning.
Now, the keywords there are relatively permanent. This isn't just about cramming for a test and then forgetting everything. Real learning is any change in your actual behavior that sticks around because of something you did or something you experienced. It's literally how you become who you are.
One of the most basic ways we learn is just by making connections between things. This is called classical conditioning. You've all heard of Pavlov's dog, right? Ring a bell, give the dog food. Ring a bell, give the dog food. Do that enough times, and pretty soon, just ringing the bell is enough to make the dog drool. It's learned to connect the two things.
But we also learn from the consequences of our own actions. That's operant conditioning. It's simple. If a behavior gets you something good, a reward, you're probably going to do it again. If it leads to something bad, a punishment, you're less likely to do it again. It's this basic principle of reward and punishment that shapes so much of our daily lives.
So let's just pull all of this together. Out of a sea of noise, your brain pays attention to something, then it perceives a pattern. Then it thinks about that pattern, and finally it learns from the whole experience, changing itself for whatever comes next. It is a truly remarkable assembly line. We've just walked through the basic operating system of your mind. This is the toolkit you use every single second of every day to filter, interpret, process, and grow from the world around you. It is without a doubt the most powerful tool in the known universe. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build with it?